Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Hello, everyone, and I have the privilege today to welcome a very special guest, Andrew Tarvin. Andrew, you could not join in a better time on the 31st of March, almost on 1st of April.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel? How does it feel? It's not a joke, by the way. You're on The Leaders Who Care.
Oh no, I appreciate it. It's not a joke show. No, but tomorrow's a fun day. It's April Fool's Day. Is an excuse for us to all add a little bit more levity to our day, I think.
Well, what a great moment to prepare people for tomorrow's fun day. You know, what are the best or some of examples? How can we prepare the people so they can have more fun tomorrow? What are the best fools they can?
Well, I think it partially depends on the direction that they want to go. Do they want to go, hey, I'm just going to have a little bit more fun, positivity, which I think telling stories and using humor is a great way to do it. Or they're like, I want to do some pranks. Some people use the 1st of April to do some pranks of, you know, a popular one is to, you know, if you're in the office, to cover people's desks completely in Post-it notes or bubble wrap. Or you can have fun with shortcuts and auto changers. So if you want to have fun with your significant other, you can auto correct a common word that they use to something else. So you can, a friend of mine recently changed their spacebar key to the clap emoji. You know, you sometimes see on social media where there's claps in between every single space. And so that's one thing that you can do is auto correct a change and have a little bit of levity in what you do.
Well, thank you. You know, this is really given some great ideas. Probably there are many others that you want to share of not to-do list on that. But Andrew, tell us about really the impact of humor. First of all, what excited you? How did you become a humor engineer? Is that a profession of the future?
It might be. I don't know. So yeah, humor engineer is a job title. If you've never heard of it.
Where did you study?
I studied at The Ohio State University.
Do they have a humor engineering degree there, or
not yet? I need to work on that because I got a regular computer science and engineer degree from Ohio State, and the origin of humor engineer is actually that, you know, I was working at Procter Gamble as an IT project manager, solving workplace challenges with computers, and as I started doing more and more of this humor engineering, I realized like, oh wait, I'm solving workplace challenges, things like employee engagement, stress management, communication skills, leadership skills, etc. I'm solving that with humor. So I think that makes me a humor engineer. And that's kind of where the origin of the name came from.
Amazing. And so if you just take us through, you know, what inspired you to spend, you know, and make a career shift?
It kind of started from this one terrible meeting that I had been in. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting, Marian, that is so boring, it like makes you want to cry. Right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Like one of those meetings where you're just kind of sitting there and you're daydreaming about other things you wish you could be doing instead of being in that meeting. And you're like, not necessarily thinking of exciting things. You're like, I wish I could like fold laundry right now, or, you know, like maybe I should schedule a root canal just so I feel something. It's just one of those terribly boring meetings. And the problem with that particular meeting at P&G was that I was the one leading the meeting. And I had this realization where it's like, okay, if I'm bored while talking, the other people in my audience have to be bored while listening. And so are there ways that I can bring humor into my own work just to make it more fun for myself? And I started to have a little bit more fun, but also started to realize it was resonating with other people. People were more likely to show up to my meetings. They seemed more likely to respond to my emails. And In fact, a coworker pulled me aside one day and just kind of thanked me. And I didn't know what she was thanking me for. So I was like, it's about time you're thanking me. And, why? Why exactly? And she was like, thank you for making our work a little bit more fun. She said, before joining your team, I was thinking about quitting. I was thinking about leaving. I wasn't enjoying what I did. And then, started working with you and realized that you just decided to use humor. No one told you to. And that was kind of that moment where I was like, oh, there is something to this humor in the workplace. And it doesn't seem to be something that people talk a lot about. So can I be someone who introduces this to other people to help them realize that not only can they have a little bit more fun at work, but it's also going to help them get better results?
Wow, that is amazing. And what are you doing today, Andrew? Just take us through your where you are. How does your day look like? Being a human engineer, I can imagine doing a lot of humorous shows.
Yes, yeah. We've spent a lot of time on virtual. I've learned, actually, the computer science degree helps again, because I've learned so much about Zoom and Microsoft Teams and WebEx and GoToWebinar and all the different platforms of Remo and Attendify and, of course, StreamYard and Restream and all of that. But all of that in service of we've switched to virtual programs as of March of last year. Prior to that, we would travel around and speak at conferences or organizations. That's how Stein and I met. And we would do hands-on trainings. And now we do all that virtual. We've done 180 plus programs since March of last year, helping people learn this skill. And so, the average day varies. If we take today as an example, I get to kick off my morning here with the conversation with you. And then a little bit later, going into prep mode, we are launching 30 Days of Humor tomorrow. So April is National Humor Month. And so we're doing prep with that. And we're kicking off tomorrow with a working from home comedy special, where we're going to be recording a comedy special via Zoom that we're going to be able to share out there. And so, it looks like that. And then coming up throughout the month, we've got hands-on workshops to teach people the skill. We've got performance opportunities for people to practice the skill. And then, of course, we've got content where we're talking about, okay, how do we actually use humor effectively?
Does it come naturally? Is there different types of humor, by the way? Because tell us a little bit more about the humor itself, and obviously the different types of it.
Certainly. Well, so I believe humor is a skill, which means it can be learned. And I believe that because I'm someone who has had to learn how to use humor. I have a TEDx talk with now over, I think, almost like 9 million views on it, on the skill of humor. I have done stand-up or spoken in 30 countries in all 50 US states. I've done over 1,000 shows. So I have reason to believe I'm semi-funny. And when I went and was talking to old high school classmates of mine, and they found out that I did comedy, they're like, but you're not funny. Because I was never that like funny class clown or like the always making jokes person in high school. I'm very much an introvert. And I had to learn and develop this skill. And so what we believe at my organization, Humor That Works, we believe that the question isn't, are you funny? The question is, what kind of funny are you? And there are these different kind of humor profiles or personalities, if you will, and understanding what your natural style is can help you to tap into it. So you can say, okay, how can I actually leverage that in the workplace for these better results? So absolutely, I do think humor is something that's not necessarily, for some people it comes naturally, for other people it doesn't, but it is something that anyone can learn to do and that can tap into their own style for better results.
There was, I was reading about and watching this very interesting video, and there were, this is from the Chinese proverbs back in the days. There were 3 monks that were going, all they did is going around cities in China, and what they'll do, they go into the center of cities, start laughing their head off. So just laughing, nothing else. They didn't talk to anyone. So people think, what are these guys laughing? I mean, as you start laughing, people start to laugh. Mm-hmm. and they don't know why, but it's contagious. And when everybody starts to laugh in that town, they said, we've done our job, we'll go to the next one.
Absolutely.
and that's what they were doing all their lives. And one day, they basically headed to this town, and they were going and spreading out, and they were really making such a kind of profound difference. But one day, one of them died, and then the other of them still were laughing their head off, and they're thinking, how did that happen? People were coming from all over the place. Why are you laughing? You died. Well, and then beforehand they had a bet, basically, who's gonna die, first, and laughing. So it was like just a very interesting, way of, but how I sincerely believe that making, people laugh and through laughter, through really sincere fun, makes a profound difference. So it's and that's been used for centuries. What is your advice, Andrew, especially for people who think they are not funny? So I'm not funny, but what could they do or learn or improve in order to have, first of all, more fun for themselves? Because I guess that's where it starts.
It does. Well, and it's an interesting story of the monks. There's actually a practice called laughter yoga, which it's not laughing while doing yoga, although that's how I tend to do yoga because I'm terrible at it. But laughter yoga is essentially that you have these people,
I haven't tried that, laughing during while yoga. I mean, this is, you tell that to a yoga guy.
Right.
You're like, I need to concentrate, man. I don't want to laugh.
Right, exactly. I need to be focused on my breathing, not laughing. But laughter yoga is a process where you have like a laughter guru or someone who is leading you through essentially laughter exercises. And it's an interesting kind of background because we know that there are certain physiological benefits of laughter, from pure like even removing the emotional value of it. Physiological benefits in terms of laughing increases blood flow through the body. It lowers blood pressure. It boosts the immune system. It relaxes muscles, like all of these great benefits to laughing. And what's interesting is that the body doesn't actually know the difference between a genuine laugh and kind of forced laughter. And a lot of times if you force yourself to laugh, it becomes an authentic laugh. And so that's the premise of laughter yoga, is these people will come in and teach you to laugh. And even if it's like completely forced at first, it becomes authentic laughter later, and you get all of those benefits. Now, I say all that recognizing, like, as an engineer, laughter yoga is really interesting to me, but it's not something that I necessarily like to do, right? Because some people listening and they're like, oh, that sounds great, I'd love to do that. Other people are like, that sounds weird. And that's what we're talking about in terms of that difference of styles. Right, exactly. You start laughing at the idea of laughter yoga. But that's all back to the style piece, right? There's no one size fits all. There's not a set thing that necessarily is going to work for every single person. And so to get started, the first profile that we often talk about is simply an appreciator. This is someone who appreciates humor and recognize it. And that's one of actually the best ways that a leader can encourage more humor in the workplace, is by appreciating it more vocally. Like if someone on your team does something that incorporates a little bit of humor, even if it's not the funniest thing in the world, you can laugh or you can smile about it or support them. Be like, hey, I appreciated that you started that meeting with a story, or I appreciated that you're bringing in a little bit of levity, because that encourages people to let them know. The number one reason why people don't use humor in the workplace is that they don't think their boss or coworkers would approve. And that means if you don't see, as a leader, if you don't see humor being used on your team or within your group, you're probably part of the reason why, right? Not necessarily maliciously or intentionally. You might have never said the words, humor is terrible, never do it. But if through your actions, you're not using it yourself and you're not encouraging or supporting it, people may not think that it's welcome in the workplace. And so as leaders, one of the first things that we can do, regardless of your humor skill, is to appreciate it visibly and vocally a little bit more.
Wow. And you just say appreciator. What other types of laughter are there?
Sure. Yeah.
Getting curious about here.
Yeah, so we think that there are 7 humor kind of profiles. So the appreciator is the first one. The second one is a curator. And a curator is someone who isn't necessarily funny themselves, but they know, like, when they see something funny, they see like a funny meme, or they watch a video, or they read a quote, and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. My friend so-and-so would really enjoy this, right? So they don't necessarily have to be the one that created the humor, but they can be the curator of it. They can say, oh, this is a really good story. I want to share this with people. Or I didn't come up with this kind of video, but I'm going to share this video at the beginning of a meeting to set the stage or set the tone for the day. So someone who's really good at understanding why something is funny and then applying it and sharing it with other people that would appreciate it. It's the person who's like always, like, I have a good friend of mine from high school who's always sending me memes on Instagram that like always crack me. He just knows my sense of humor so well that he sends me this stuff that he's like, you're going to like this. So that's a curator. Next, we have a creator. And a creator is someone who is good at coming up with humor themselves, of writing it down, of pre-planning it. Someone who maybe tweets the funniest things, or there's someone who like is a cartoonist and they can draw these really funny, compelling images, right? So they're really good at creating it. So that's number 3, right? So we have appreciator, curator, creator. We also have the performer. And the performer is someone who is just really good at delivery. They're the person that when they're at a party, like people just gather around them to hear the stories. Or they're that person that you know that like they can make a trip to the grocery store sound like the most compelling or most interesting experience ever. Just something about the way that they deliver, you're like compelled by and you want to hear it. And then the last section is people who are good at applying humor. So we have the engineer. So this is, I'm an engineer. I am someone who uses humor very intentionally to solve a problem or to make a point, right? So I think of it less of like, let's just humor for the sake of humor, and more of like, okay, how do I get an audience to pay attention to me right away? Oh, if I use a little bit of humor once they're laughing, I know they're listening. Or how do I use humor to manage my own stress? If it's been a tough day, what can I do? So very strategic, the engineer. And then finally, you have the advocate. And the advocate is someone who is very good at creating a culture of humor, creating the space for humor where they facilitate it. They like encourage it of other people. Like, they create a podcast where people can kind of chat about it and bring on guests. But right, they're setting other people up for success with humor and creating that space for them. And the last profile is if you're like, all of that sounds stupid, or I don't understand why we're talking about humor in the first place, or humor is a distraction, I don't get all of this, then you're typically a skeptic, right? Someone who is not quite sure of why do we need this in the workplace, and maybe just need a little bit of convincing. That's where we can share with you the statistics, we can share with you the results, so, we can share with you all of these things to say, okay, this is why humor actually is valuable in today's work environment.
I remember someone was saying, you need to be serious about your work. You're like, not to be laughing, because if you're not serious about work, when you go on holiday, you might be thinking about your work.
Right, which I think is an interesting point, though. Like, is if you are serious about your work, if you believe what you are doing for work is important, then to me, I would think that you would want to use anything in your arsenal, anything in your repertoire that's going to help you get better results. And that's something that humor can do, because some of our clients surprise people. We've worked with the United Nations, with the FBI, with the Red Cross, these organizations that people don't typically think of as like, oh, that's a hysterical group. And people are always kind of surprised by that. But the reality is, like, for example, the Red Cross. We've been doing some work with one of their presenters where his point is, if he's presenting on disaster preparedness, right? If he's leading a presentation where he's going to teach you what to do in the case of a flood or in the case of a drought, or information that could save your life later, his point is that boredom has very serious consequences. And what we believe is that just because a message is important, it doesn't mean that it's interesting. Right? We've all tuned out of PSAs and other things before. And so if we know that this message is really important for us to get across, we're going to use the techniques that we know are effective. Humor is one of them. So we're going to say, yeah, if you are actually serious about your work and serious about the results that you want to get, you'll actually use humor because it helps you to get those results better.
I can imagine using humor with FBI.
Yeah.
You go in people's home tomorrow, say FBI. Oh, this is the 1st of April.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the 1st of April tomorrow.
We're allowed.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, that's part of the work that we're doing with the FBI is that less on like the, fighting crime hand to hand and interrogating people type thing, but more of they recognize that there is a certain kind of seriousness or status or fear that comes from interacting with the FBI. And so they wanted to understand how can humor help them build better relationships with people. And humor is a great way to reduce status differentials. It's a great way to, like, by using a little bit of humor, you show the other person like, oh, they don't take themselves too seriously, or we can have a little bit of fun, and it humanizes them a little bit more so that they can have the types of conversations that they want to have, as opposed to the person being scared the whole time. Now, I'll admit the FBI is one of the most intimidating groups I've ever presented to, because that was an in-person event before the pandemic, and it's the first presentation that I've ever done where 90% of the room was armed, where it's kind of like slightly terrifying, where everyone has a gun on their hip, like, oh, they don't like this joke, this could go poorly. So it is intimidating, but by using humor, they lighten up.
You better make me laugh, otherwise I'll take the gun out.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. And you mentioned humor is one of those techniques for kind of taking your work serious. You mentioned it, and humor is what are the other techniques apart from humor that can be used, to improve the workplace?
I mean, I think humor is a big one, certainly within leadership. As a leader, I think there's a few things that people can do to create an environment. We do a program called Leading on Your Feet, which is all about how do we actually lead in this world of constantly changing, and more importantly, how do we avoid the dangers of unleadership? And so we think of unleadership as the things that demotivate people that leaders don't even necessarily realize that they're doing. And a big part of that comes from this idea that there's a difference between intention and action, right? There's a difference between thinking about something and then actually implementing it and doing it. So, for example, I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and is like, you know what? I want to lead a boring meeting today. Or they're like, you know what? I want to send like 1,000 unnecessary emails and I want to reply to all a bunch of times when I shouldn't. Or they're like, I'm going to talk for like 2 minutes while on mute. That's what I'm going to do. In fact, I'm going to do that 3 or 4 times today. Like, no one wakes up with that intention, I don't think. But it happens every day, right? And so the problem as a leader and as people in general is that we tend to judge other people by their actions, right? It's the only thing that I can see someone else do. But we tend to judge ourselves by our intention, right? Like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Marian, but have you ever felt good about yourself just because of something that you thought?
Yep, absolutely.
Right? Not necessarily something you did, but you thought about something and you're like, I'm a good person for having even thought that.
Some people do that all the time.
Right, exactly. They're like, I'm an amazing person in my head. Now, does it actually translate into action in the real world? Well, that's to be, see. And so because of this gap, because of unleadership, I think there's some things that we have to, one, recognizing what that unleadership looks like can be helpful, right? Like micromanaging is an example of unleadership, because instead of like giving someone their capability, instead of like them using their own strengths to achieve something, you're like basically trying to program them. Micromanagement is basically like kind of trying like program a computer. It's like, do this thing in this exactly this way at exactly this time. And it's like, there's no autonomy. There's no ownership over that. And that's demotivating to people. And so we can start to think in terms of, to answer your question, like what are other things that we as leaders can do? Humor is a big one. It helps to build vigor. It helps to build resilience within an organization, helps to build a culture of appreciation, helps to build psychological safety. I think vulnerability is another one to help to express, to cultivate, not vulnerability of like, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, right? I'm an engineer still, first and foremost, but vulnerability in the sense that people do feel psychologically safe, that they feel like they can be their authentic self, that they don't have to put on a work face, right? So vulnerability is key. I think seeking out versatility and leveraging people's strengths is another one. like I'm a huge fan of things like Strength Finders 2.0 or other things to recognize that like leadership is not a hat, right? It's not one size fits all. And the best leaders adapt to who their team is, because you can't always control, you can't always enforce or control what people bring to the table, but you can adapt your leadership style and recognize, oh, the way that I need to, lead or motivate Marian might be very different than what I need to do for Stoyan, right? Or it might be very different than I need to do for Anya or for these other people, right? The different ways that you're communicating, their preferences, etc. You need to adapt to get the most out of that person. I think that's what effective leaders do. And the last two is, I do think effective leaders have a good vision. They have a good understanding of like, this is where we're headed. This is what we're going towards. And even more important, I think, maybe equally as important as that, is leaders help their people develop their own vision. They help their people connect what their individual vision is in life and how does that connect to the organization. Because when people have meaning in their work and when they can see how it helps to contribute to either, safety and security for their family or a challenging work environment where they like challenging in a good way, where they're constantly like growing and improving, or they're having a meaningful impact on the world. When they have those things, employers are much more engaged, are much less likely to leave for another job, etc. So a leader can help to make that connection. And then finally, the last and most important one is they create velocity, or they actually put things into action, right? It goes back to that action piece. What are you actually doing? Because what we say is that knowing matters, but doing matters more, right? Or as Stephen Covey would say, used to say, is that to know and not to do is really to not know. Right. It's this idea of like, you can have all the knowledge that you want in those books behind you, but if you're not implementing them, right, if you're not implementing the great insights and things like that from the book Perform and other then you're not going to truly have an impact. And so you need to actually put those things into action.
Amazing. We have some questions here from Stoyankov. One of them is, Andrew, you mentioned the power of telling impactful stories. As an engineer, what are the components of a good story? Could anyone become good at telling and engaging stories?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great question. And yeah, absolutely. People can become better at telling stories, right? And this is true about humor as well. What we talk about in our program is that we believe anyone can learn to be funnier. Right. We make no guarantees that like, you're not going to like listen to one podcast. You're not going to join us for National Humor Month, or you're not going to come to one of our programs and immediately have a Netflix comedy special. Right. Like it takes time and it takes skill set, and we can teach you the basic skills, but it's kind of like playing the piano. Right. You can sit down and learn the scales and get better, but that doesn't immediately mean that you're going to be like a virtuoso who's going to do, piano concerts all around the world. And I think the same is true for humor. And I think the same is true for storytelling, because there are some people who are just really bad at telling stories. They give you way more information than you need to know, or they don't know kind of the structure of it, or they forget all the details. They're like, oh, so I went to this store and it was like, I was at this corner of, was it that corner or was it this other corner? Well, this wrong song, like they get distracted or they get like et cetera. Like there are there's people who are not great at telling stories, but I think anyone can learn to become better. And one way to do that is through understanding the components of stories. So if we think about Hollywood, a lot of times we think of beginning, middle, and end for a story. In business, I think we can translate that to context, action, results, right? So what was the context leading into the event? What action did you take? And then what was the result of those actions? So an example story, we're talking a little bit about laughter yoga. Reminds me of yoga earlier. So I went to I went to my first yoga class just a couple of years ago when I was still dating my now wife. And she asked if I wanted to go to a yoga class. And I wanted to impress her, wanted to show her like I was cool. I was hip to do, all this stuff. Never been to a yoga class before. But of course, I was like, yes, happy to. It'll be great. Going to have so much fun. But I didn't want her to know that I had never been to a yoga class. And so we go to yoga class. And I decide I'm just going to mirror everything that she does, right? Because I don't know any of the poses. I don't know any of the names or the moves or anything like that. So I'm like, I'll just watch what she does and then repeat it. And it worked pretty well. right? We're going through the yoga class. We're doing all of the animal poses. We basically go to the zoo, what it feels like, right? Because you do cat cow, and then you do pigeon pose, and then downward facing dog, and then crouching tiger, hidden dragon, and like all the different animal poses. And at the very end, we got to, I think it's called Shavasana. It's the pose where you kind of like lie there and like focus on your breathing. It's what some people call the dessert pose. And it was very nice. And my wife reached over and grabbed my hand while we were doing that, which was like very adorable, sweet, kind of romantic moment that we had. The problem is that I was mirroring everything that she did. And so I just, reached over and grabbed the hand of the man next to me. And now I'm no longer allowed back at Yoga Vida. Yeah.
Right. So what did you do? You turn, say the laughter yoga.
Exactly. So now this becomes laughter yoga. It's like, oh, okay, yep. Sorry about that. Learn about it, right? But now it becomes this story. And so a couple of things about this story. So one, if we think about that terms of context, action, results of what I just shared, context was like me sharing, like, hey, was dating my wife. Wanted to impress her, never been to a yoga class before.
Why was it important for her not to know that you'd never been to a yoga?
Because it was still early on, and I wanted to impress her. I wanted her to think that, I was cool, that I was hip, that I would like, that I was into these things that she was into.
Yeah, right? You were cool by touching men's hands.
Right, exactly, by grabbing people's hands in there, right? And obviously, like now, it's like, of course, like I could have just shared, like, oh, I've never been, but I'm still happy to go. But right in my mindset, it was like, for whatever reason, that was the context, right?
That's the best you knew. That
exactly, that's the best I knew. And so then so that's the context. Then you have the action. What did you do? Okay, so I went to the yoga class. I mirrored everything that she did, right? That's kind of the actions that I'm following. And then the result is, well, by taking those actions, the result is that I end up holding the hand of a stranger, a guy right next to me, right? So that's that structure, context, action, results. Now, the value of a leader learning storytelling is that I can now use that story in a number of. Imagine starting a meeting, and rather than me start right away into something boring or showing a bunch of graphs or charts or something like right away, I could start like, I'm going to start with today we're talking a little bit about a growth mindset, or today we're talking about failure. Today we're talking about trying something new, right? Imagine there's a new change coming into the organization where we're adapting a new software system. I was in IT, right? So a lot of times we had to do that. So if I start a meeting like, hey, I know, so we're adopting this new software system, but I know change can be difficult. In fact, let me tell you a short story about time I tried to do yoga for the very first time. So I can tell that story. It takes 2, maybe 3 minutes. I get people listening. I get people laughing. They're enjoying the story. And then I can say at the very end of that, after I talk about the results, I can say, now the reason why I told you that story is that it can be intimidating to do something new, right? We're going to mess up. We're going to accidentally hold the hand of the man next to me because we don't know entirely what we're going to, entirely how to do it. Most important thing is when we mess up is that we can laugh about it and move on, right? And now I can go into, and so when we talk about this system that we're going to implement, we're going to make these mistakes, right? But now I've got the audience bought in. Now they're leaning in a little bit more. Now I've created this. And at the same time, I've shown the people listening that I don't take myself too seriously, right? I've lowered my status a little bit in a good way to say, hey, I am human. I do make mistakes, and I can laugh about those mistakes. So there's tremendous power to that. And I'll tell you the thing that people will remember later, because I'll share that story sometimes when I'm speaking. That's one of the stories that people remember. They'll be like, oh my God, that yoga story was so funny. And the fact that they remember it, they might remember the lesson as part of it as well. So great question about that. But storytelling is a powerful way to be a stronger leader because it helps you to set that vision.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We have another question here from Stoyan Yankov again. And Andrew, you recently had a collaboration with Simon Sinek. How did the opportunity happen? And what did you learn from working with Simon and his team?
Yeah, well, we're still leading. We're part of Simon Sinek's classroom, which is like basically online instruction in different programs in different areas. And how it came about is there's tremendous value in being known for something. And sometimes you know what you're known for because of what people send you. So I know I'm known for puns. because whenever someone sees like a really good pun that they like, they send it to me. They're like, oh, did you see this pun, or did you see this wordplay, or this really made me laugh out loud, or this made me think of you. And from an organizational perspective, though, I am known for this focus on humor in the workplace. And so a friend of mine, a guy named Heath Slon, has done work with Simon's team for a number of years. And Simon's team was looking for, they're like, we want to do something on levity. We want to do something on laughter or humor and, the pandemic, because it's a challenging time and it's something that is missing. And because I'm kind of known by people for humor, like Heath was like, immediately, I know someone. And so he put me in touch. We got connected. And, that's part of the value of the network. But more importantly, as part of that network, it's a value of being known for something within that network, for people to know like, oh, this person is a really good leader in X, Y, or Z. And so that's how it came about. The work itself, what I've learned from that is, part of, Simon's first message, or that, really resonate with people, is starting with why. People really, when you can start with why you are doing something, why this is valuable, it helps to resonate. Because I don't know, like, I think my guess is that for the people listening, my guess is that many of them are working far too hard not to know what they're working for. Right? Like, the work you do every single day is only worth it if it is actually worth it. And the only way you know that is if you're clear on the why. It's okay, why does this organization exist? What is our purpose? Goes back to that idea of vision. Why do I actually work at this organization? What can I contribute? How can I provide a service to get us closer to that goal? And for humor, it's like, okay, why do we want to use humor? Well, it's like, well, we know that it can improve productivity. It can reduce stress. It can help you enjoy your work a little bit more. And so we'll often start with the why. We'll start with the research and the studies, and we'll sometimes start with the dumb question. And this is a valuable kind of why question. The dumb question, and Marian, you can answer this, is the question is, would you rather do something that is fun or not fun?
Of course, fun. It's, in fact, what you're saying is, people, I've noticed that in my experience, because we're not robots. We have feelings and we associate ourselves. And what I've noticed is that people like to be around people who make them feel good, or fun, have fun, and that attracts, that is really kind of makes a profound difference in people's environment. So, and then coming here to care, and I just wanted to ask you, how do you care for yourself, Andrew? First, obviously, we know we'll talk about you link, and we'll talk about the link between care and laughter. But more importantly, what do you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I want to just briefly touch on what you just said. I think you're exactly right that people want to be around people who make them feel good. They want to be around people who make them laugh or are positive and supportive. And that's why research shows, back to the question of fun or not fun, research shows us that, people want to do things that are fun. So if we can make our meetings a little bit more fun, right, and make them more positive with other people, people are going to be more likely to attend. If you are known to be a little bit more fun to work with, you're going to get more opportunities. That's what the research shows. People who use effective humor in the workplace are given more opportunities, because it makes sense. Because if you're trying to decide as a leader between, like, who should I give this important project to? This person who's pretty good, but man, do I hate being in meetings with them because it's boring and dry the whole time. Or this person who's also good, but like they make me laugh or they make me smile, or like I just enjoy being around them, right? It's going to go to the person who you enjoy. Same thing for leaders. Who are you going to follow as a leader? Someone who like makes you feel terrible, or someone who makes you feel like who you recognize, who cares as well. So I think you're exactly right that like people want to be around people who make them feel better. So it's a strategic advantage, competitive advantage to have effective humor in a way. In terms of answering the question for how do I care for myself, I think there's a few things. One is trying to manage my schedule. So I am an introvert, and people are often surprised by that because I speak for a living, because I do stand up and improv comedy, etc. And I will say I love all of these things. I love podcasts like this. I love this conversation that we're having, but I also need to recharge on my own. So when we're done with this, I have a meeting right after. But when I'm done with that meeting, I have scheduled in my calendar what I say a meeting with McKinsey. And McKinsey is just the name that I gave my computer. And that's intentionally blocked off on my calendar so that I have time to recharge.
Did
so
you say McKinsey or McKinsey?
McKinsey.
McKinsey, okay, it's not the consultancy firm, right?
It's not that. Yeah, not the consulting firm. It comes from the fact that this one computer, like I have two computers. One of them is a Mac, and so I thought it was kind of funny for McKinsey. Anyway, that's just for me, right? Sometimes the humor you use is just for you. It's not funny to other people. But that's one way that I care for myself, is trying to schedule in these breaks throughout the day because I know that I need them. I know that I need like a short walk to kind of decompress, or I know that I exercise in the middle of the day, which is easier to do during the pandemic because it serves as a break for me. Certainly making sure that I am, the thing that I'm the worst, I think, is good diet. Is, I'm someone who, like, if I wake up and immediately go into work, it could be like 2 p.m. before I have my first food. Like I've been intermittent fasting for years just because I forget to eat breakfast. And I don't know that that's I
was going to say, you're doing already healthy things by forget to eat.
Right, exactly. But
is there a correlation between humor and forgetting to eat or not?
No, I think I love humor so much. I snack on laughter. No, I don't know. Well, there you go.
You snack on laughter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that could be good for the nutritionist. Give a diet on humor.
Exactly. But that is one of the other things that I do is I will include strategic, what I learned from training that I took at P&G called Corporate Athlete, which is one of the best trainings I've ever taken. They talked about the importance of strategic disengagement. And so in some ways, I will snack on laughter because if I've had a tough meeting, if I'm feeling stressed out, if I'm feeling like low on energy, I'll like go and watch a couple of quick YouTube videos. Or I'll go on Instagram, or and I follow a lot of comedians and cartoonists and stuff on Instagram, on social media, because I want to be able to go to a place where, I'm going to find some laughter. I'm going to have a little bit of a moment to laugh, release some of that stress, so that then I can go back into work.
Now you're on that point because people might be interested. They might do the same. What are the recommendations? What are kind of the ones you recommend to check out for laughter? If anyone wants to check out some kind of comedians or YouTube videos, what are the places where you go to?
Well, I'm a big fan of curate, like places that curate stuff. So Dad Says Jokes as an Instagram meme. I love puns and wordplay. So there's an Instagram account called Dad Says Jokes, which is all about kind of dad jokes out there. The Wholesome Meme subreddit. I like I think wholesome memes are just great, like positive fun. If you want that kind of positive thing, I think is a great resource for it.
What is it called?
Wholesome memes. Yeah. Like wholesome as in like positive and like, over almost cute in a sense. But it's a great positive source of memes. Different other subreddits too, depending on your sense or style of humor, can be interesting for that. Trying to think the, Twitter feed there's a number of and even the Wendy's Twitter feed, like if you like brands roasting other brands, like aggressive humor a little bit more, like the Wendy's Twitter feed, I think can be really good. Just following and cartoonists, like an Instagram, there's Nathan Pyle, who does this series of aliens kind of like here in on Earth, and kind of like this are like, it just shows their kind of perspective on things. So it's kind of a really interesting take on just kind of the things that we assume is normal as people. But like, if you looked at it from an outside perspective, you'd be like, wait, why is that true? But I think that's a big thing that people can do is if you start to add photographers and cartoonists and humorists and stuff to your social media, like follow people who are going to bring you that positive moment. Like, maybe you don't need to follow every single news outlet, because then you have an entire social media feed that's negative. Add in some positive stuff in there so that as you're scrolling through, you get some of that positivity. Of course, you can also follow me. Like, I tweet puns mostly. So if you're like, hey, I love the pun stuff, you can also follow me if you want that as a source. What I love is when people also add to my puns. So especially on Facebook, people are really good at like, I'll say a joke and then other people will add even stronger jokes on that same kind of idea underneath it. And that's like, that's a moment of kind of levity for people.
Awesome. Andrew, in this moment in time, it's you've done quite a lot. You've seen a few things. You kind of seems like you have a very fun, kind of time. What excites you in these days? What are the things that you're interested in?
I mean, there's a number of things that excite me. Like the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe on Disney Plus is really exciting to me. That's probably not what you're going for. The Star Wars series as well. I'm a huge nerd. Like I love that kind of stuff. So I'm excited about that. More importantly, though, is I'm excited because there seems to have been, when I first started speaking about humor in the workplace, it was very often an upward climb. There was a lot of like skepticism about it. There was a lot of selling that I had to do about the value of humor. And it does seem like over the past few years, and certainly during the pandemic, there has been a shift because people have realized just how much humor they're missing in their lives. They didn't realize how much levity they got from having the hallway conversations in the workplace or the water cooler conversations, or even just being able to see people smile in the street, right? Because so many people are wearing masks now, you can't even necessarily have that same quick level of connection. And so I think people recognizing like, oh, we need this laughter. And so what excites me is people's recognition of the value of humor and their willingness to explore it, right? To kind of be like, okay, maybe there is something to this. And I was pushed into humor. I was not someone who was like, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian, right? Wasn't raising my hand. I was at Ohio State. My best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group, needed people, and forced me to join. And I was a little bit hesitant and I was terrible at it, but I pretty quickly fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is like to give someone else the gift of laughter is so rewarding. It's so like addicting in some ways. You just like, okay, I want to make more people laugh. I want to make more people laugh. But the fact that I was pushed into it is part of the reason why I get so excited and passionate for introducing it to other people. Because there's some people out there who are already like, yep, I'm already funny. I'm already going to use it. Great. We're more than happy to help them tweak it and refine it. But what I really like is when we introduce humor to people who think, oh, I could never do improv, or I'm not funny, or I can't tell a story. And we introduce some of the concepts of it. We teach them about the art and science of it. And now they're like, oh, I have a little bit more confidence. Oh, I can give this a try. Because we give them a safe space to practice it. And for those people to go and use it and see the positive results that they get, like that's what gets me excited. Because I just have seen how much it's transformed my life. To be able to try to introduce that to other people is incredibly exciting and rewarding. And I think we're at a time where people are open to it.
Awesome. One important question, how do we make really the conversation with ourselves more fun? And really not take ourselves too seriously, because someone said, if we have to listen to our inner conversations, we probably should be put into a crazy or madhouse.
You're right, and it's interesting because I've heard something similar in the sense like someone was saying like you would never let someone else talk to the way that you talk to yourself. Right. For so many people, they're down on themselves. They're very like aggressive with like, oh, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? Or like they get upset. Like it's like you would never let someone else, a stranger, speak to you that way. So why do you allow yourself to? Why do you allow that inner voice or conversation to? And I think there's a fundamental principle or mindset of improvisation called yes and it is basically how we as improvisers get on stage and make things up off the top of our head. And it's in stark contrast to a very common mindset of yes, but. And now this isn't to say that yes, but is a bad thing, right? Yes, but is critical thinking. Yes, but is how we can say no in a nicer way. It's just we do a lot of yes, butting ourselves. So the question becomes, how can we say yes and a little bit more, both to other people, but also one of the hardest things is to be able to say yes and to ourselves. So rather than if you make a mistake, rather than being like, yes, but you're an idiot and you're never going to like get this, or you're never going to be good at yoga because you held the hand of this person or whatever, right? You're always going to be a failure. Like rather than saying yes, but how can you yes and even your own ideas? You say, yes, okay, that was awkward. And here's what I'm going to do next. And from improvisation, I've learned, at least for myself, that failure in most circumstances is just data, right? Failure is just data. It's not commentary on your worth as a human being. It's simply saying that the thing that you tried didn't work. And so maybe we tweak the change now, right? As a comedian, if I try a joke and it doesn't work, it's not to say, oh, I'm not funny and never going to be funny again. It's more of like, okay, that formulation didn't work. So maybe I can try it. Maybe I can rearrange the words a little bit. I can change the word, or maybe I just try a different joke. That yes and mindset, that failure is just data mindset, I think is a great way to improve the conversation with ourselves, to build our own self-esteem, because the life is already hard enough. Why make it harder for yourself with that conversation? Now, I will say that it can take time. For me, it was incredibly, like, I took improv classes for years because yes and at first was such a foreign concept to me. It was like, no, but I'm a critical thinker. I'm like an engineer. I like to solve problems. I like to point out what's not going to work and then fix them. And so it took me time. It took me going to a bunch of improv classes and for it to become a thing that became ingrained. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. That's what we want to do, is we want to create a safe space for people to learn these skills, to practice them, because they know that, they don't necessarily happen overnight. And so how do we give people that opportunity to practice it so it becomes second nature that you yes and? So that when something happens on the road and someone cuts you off in traffic, you're yes ending like, okay, well, that person, maybe they just need somewhere to go, because it doesn't do you any positivity to get really upset at them. It's like, okay, let's just assume that they're in a rush and they have, they're going to meet their wife at the hospital because they're maybe going to have a baby boy or something, or baby girl, right? They're, maybe it's something exciting that they're rushing to, and we're going to allow them to do it. You can yes and these things so that your life becomes more playful, more fun. It takes practice, but it can be very rewarding when you get there.
That's awesome, Andrew. What a great advice. I love it, to really change just a slight tweak. Don't say yes, but say yes and.
That's right.
Here's what I'm going to do next. Awesome. Well, final question. There's a lot more, but first of all, looking at really the future, and what are you optimistic about? What is your vision for your short midterm future, especially looking at the crisis we're going through? What do you see when you close your eyes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. The interesting thing about the future, I don't know that I'm necessarily good at predicting it, and I used to want to. As a project manager, I used to do a lot of planning to kind of be like, here's my 5-year plan. Here's my structured thing that I'm going to get to. And the problem is the moment that it happened, and actually it launched me into improv in some ways, is in 7th grade, I knew that I wanted to work for Procter Gamble. Because I grew up in Cincinnati, their global headquarters, and it's basically known around town. Like, if you get a good job at P&G, then you're kind of set for life. You're always going to be comfortable. You're going to have a good, salary. You're going to have a good, especially compared to the cost of living, etc. You're kind of all set. And in high school, I met my high school sweetheart, and we had dated for 4 years. We both went to Ohio State. She was a year younger than me. And so already I was planning this thing. I'm going to start, I'm going to work at Procter & Gamble. She's going to come down after we graduate. We're going to get married. We're going to have a house with a white picket fence. We're going to have, the SUV and the car. And we're going to have, a cat and a dog and 2.5 kids, right? The quote unquote American dream of, the Midwest. And listeners probably already know immediately what happened is she broke up with me in university. And kind of completely destroyed what I had planned, kind of for these 5 years. And it was really, really tough. It was a tough time. It was a dark time for me, but improv saved me in some ways because it gave me this outlet to do something. And what I realized is that I'm not good at predicting the future. I don't think very many people could have predicted how 2020 was going to go. And I've realized for myself, rather than getting comfort and security from knowing what's going to happen, I would rather get comfortable knowing that no matter what happens, I'll be able to adapt. I'll be able to adjust. And that's what improv teaches you, right? That's what having a yes and mindset teaches you, is that to say, okay, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going to be able to yes and adapt to it. Doesn't mean that I don't attempt to kind of influence that or create it. So that's the first thing, is one, to say what I'm excited about with the future is a belief in this understanding that, okay, between my wife, myself, my family, we'll be able to adapt to kind of whatever comes. And I do think that there's some positivity that's coming from, out of the pandemic. I think I'm particularly excited in the very short term. I'm excited for our 30 days of humor as a way to celebrate National Humor Month, because our goal is that we want to give back, right? We want to bring levity to a year later, because we did this last year for the very first time in April, because we're like, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We just started a pandemic. We don't know what's going on. Let's provide some levity. We had so much fun with it. We said, hey, we're going to do it again this year, because we're a year later, and people are like, a lot of people were like, wasn't this supposed to be over like after 3 months? Didn't we think that's what was going on? We were joking beforehand of like, yeah, we thought it was going to be over by summer. We just don't know which summer now. Is it, it wasn't summer of 2020. Is it summer of 2021? Are we close? I don't know. It might be summer of 2022, maybe 2023 before everything's, quote unquote, back to normal, whatever it is. And so we're really excited about that, because it's a way for us to, share levity with a lot more people. It's a way to introduce a lot more people to humor, and hopefully give them some skills that they can apply both in their work and life. So I think, that's what we're really, really excited about in the very immediate term.
Awesome, Andrew. Well, first of all, thank you for taking care of so many through humor. I honestly believe that's a form of great care, and I want to sincerely thank you. Final question: where people can find you, or companies, as a matter of fact, because what you're doing is amazing. It has a profound impact on people, and you make them improve their life, their day. That's really amazing.
I appreciate that. And yeah, so if people want to learn more about kind of what we do, you can go to humorthatworks.com. And on the corporate side of things, we've got a link for organizations to join. So if people want to learn about our workshops that we do virtually, or our group or one-on-one coaching for leaders, if leaders are like, how do I actually create this organization? We have one-on-one coaching available as well. For individual people, also on humorthatworks.com, we have a bunch of free resources. So blog posts and videos and things. We've got a link to our book and other, resources for people. Also, that's where you can find out, if you go to humorthatworks.com, click on the events tab. That's where you'll find out all the stuff for National Humor Month. So if you want to join us, we've got something for every day of April, where we're going to be exploring those profiles that we talked a little bit about earlier, where we're going to have something for the appreciators. We'll have something else for the curators. We'll have something else for the creators, the performers, the engineers, and the advocates, right? We have things for each individual group. Even our Mondays are going to be the case of the Mondays, and we're going to appeal to the skeptics, and we're going to say, hey, these are some of the dangers of humor, and here's how to adapt to them, etc. So you can find out more about that at humorthatworks.com. If people are like, hey, you talked about puns, I want to follow you for just for the one-liners, you can follow me on all social media at Drew Tarvin. So DREWTAR, V as in Victor, IN. And that's where I share kind of observations and puns throughout the day. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, and keep spreading laughter, and have an awesome, not just a month, an awesome year of laughter.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.